So first and foremost, I want to talk about the Rising story because I saw this yesterday. And this is from Kim Iverson. Now, Kim was on here recently for the Women's Summit. And when I saw this yesterday, I was actually quite surprised, to be honest. But here we go. So Kim tweeted this yesterday. Why can't you see Rising on YouTube? Because we are suspended. A news organization aired speech from a former president. That speech was censored and the news organization was punished for airing it. Let me go ahead and show you the post that is from Rising. YouTube has temporarily suspended the Hill's channel for violating one of its policies. For now, you can watch Rising on thehill.com/HillTV and Facebook under Hill TV Live. Sign up for daily emails. So that came out yesterday. I think I just saw a comment from someone telling me that Kim just did a show about this. Oh, here it is. Kim Iverson just did a show explaining what happened. I could try to see if I can find that. But I also want to show you what Robbie said as well, because he also tweeted about this. This is really scary, actually, because let's be real. The Hill is not provocative. So if they can suspend them, this is really scary. So let me share my screen. Now, this article is by Robbie. He is also one of the co-hosts on Rising. YouTube won't distinguish between misinformation and reporting, so it suspended my channel. Now, this came out yesterday at 5:57 p.m. Listen to this. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. On December 9, 2020, YouTube announced it would take down videos that allege widespread fraudulent voting in the 2020 presidential election. A month later, after President Donald Trump lies about his loss, inflamed a mob, yada, yada. You guys know about that. Now, let's get into what happened. What casual observers might not understand, however, is just how far the policy goes. Not only does YouTube punish channels that spread misinformation, but in many cases, it also punishes channels that report on the spread of misinformation. The platform makes no distinction between the speaker and the content creator. If a channel produces a straight news video that merely shows Trump making an unfounded claim, perhaps during a speech in an interview or at a rally, YouTube will punish the channel as if the channel had made that claim. Let me come out for just a second because I want to talk about this. This is a big problem. This is what happens when you don't rely on the people to check on this information. You rely on the bots. And it's been a problem. Hardlands Media has had to deal with this. Obviously, now Rising has had to deal with this. I know people at MCSC Network have had to deal with this multiple times. It's a big problem. And this is why, if you guys notice, I stream on multiple platforms. So everything that is live streamed on YouTube for me is also live streamed on Rockfin. All my videos are backed up. That being said, anytime now, they can decide, you know what? We don't really like those independent media people on our platform. So we're just going to decide to get rid of all of them. That could happen at any moment. If that happens, it is important that you have given me your email. So I'm putting this in the chat. I usually pin this sometimes. But that is my newsletter for live stream alerts. When you sign up for that, all it's going to do is ask you for your email address. When you sign up for that, you will get an email notification every time I go live. That is done not just to give you that notification, but to give me an email list. That way, if that does happen and they take all of us down, I still have a way to get in touch with you. So definitely sign up for that. And then, yep, thank you so much, Eric. Definitely sign up for that. So thank you so much for that. But let me go back into the article because this is a big problem. So it goes on to say, I learned this firsthand on Thursday after YouTube suspended my show Rising for violating I gotta be careful what I say, misinformation policy, despite the fact that neither my co-host nor I said anything to indicate that we believed that. And so this is the problem, you guys. It picks up certain words and you may not even be the one that's saying it. Now I'll give you another example that happened recently, and that was actually Primo Radical. He had an interview with Cynthia McKinney. There was someone in the chat that was asking a question. I believe it was a super chat. And so Primo, asked the question to Cynthia McKinney, and she responded. That video was flagged by YouTube, and he challenged it. Like, he tried to appeal multiple times, and his defense was, why am I being punished for something that my guest said? I do interviews, I can't control what they say. And basically, long story short, YouTube was not trying to hear that. They really did not care. Just going to be honest with you. So he's another one that has been targeted as well. So it goes back in to say, last night we learned that YouTube had suspended The Hill's entire account. So this wasn't just like one video. It was the entire account for the next 7 days, preventing us from publishing new videos. Okay. Let me see if I can pull up that video now. So that's another thing. When you're hit with something like that, you can't stream, you can't upload, you can't do anything. And Heartlands Media, I talked to Kit, I think this has happened to them like 3 times every time they have to appeal it. And it's just ridiculous. And sometimes this can happen for videos that are 2-3 years old, that all of a sudden they'll just come back and ping you for it. I'm like, really? Like, if you created this rule, 3 years later, everything that happened before that should have been grandfathered in. I mean, to me, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So I have this video now. Oh, I don't know when she talks about it. Let me see. All right, let's see what Kim had to say. Now, this is on Kim's show. This is not on The Hill Rising. A lot of people, I don't know, some of you may not know this. Kim Iverson had her own show before she was on The Hill. That was actually when I first heard of her. So let's see what she had to say. Again, I got to be careful because I don't know what's said here. So hold on.
Establishment progressives have been censored on YouTube and other big tech platforms. But, just airing raw footage of these speeches, unless you're going to put a disclaimer on those speeches, or unless you're going to have somebody interject and immediately give a rebuttal to whatever that quote unquote misinformation was, then that results in you being the spreader of misinformation, according to YouTube. So a year ago, The Hill aired CPAC's raw footage from CPAC, got a strike on the channel. The Hill did it again. So, it's a news organization, and you should be able to air speeches from politicians and other leaders. That is newsworthy. Even if they're saying total misinformation, crackpot stuff, it doesn't matter. They need to be able to say it, and we need to be able to hear it. That is what being a free people in a free society is. And it's newsworthy. You deserve and ought to know what your political leaders are saying, even if it's totally nuts. And that goes for both sides of the aisle. You have a right to know the crazy crap these politicians are saying, right? Okay. Or you might agree with all of it, and you might not think any of it's crazy at all. That is you being a free person in a free America. That is what a free society is. But apparently not anymore. So that resulted in a second strike on the channel. And then it turned out that February 24th, a segment aired. I was not on the segment of Rising. It was actually Robbie Suave, my co-host Robbie Suave, and Ryan Grimm did a segment. Emily Jashinsky was on the segment with them. So this was the segment that aired. It was February 24th. And during this segment, they were talking specifically about Donald Trump and Donald Trump praising Putin and Putin's, strength and all that. How Trump gets when it comes to talking about Putin and Russia and the war and whatnot. Trump was on Laura Ingram's show. There he is. You can see the little phone call icon on the bottom. He was talking to Laura Ingram, talking about Putin's threats. And in that conversation, he said, he made statements about the election. I'm not going to repeat what he said because here I am on YouTube. So I don't myself want to get banned for spreading misinformation. So for spreading election misinformation. So he made a claim that we all know he makes about the election during this phone call with Laura Ingram. He says it almost knee jerk. He always says it. We all know he says it. It's not actually news. Nor do I think anybody suddenly, because they hear it from Trump today, thinks, wow, maybe there's something to what he's saying. And I got to look more into that. And I'm going to believe him and I'm going to agree with him. I think at this point, everybody in America knows, really a lot of people around the world know what Trump thinks. And so it's not actually news, nor is it really at this point, I think, spreading misinformation. But nonetheless, it is against YouTube's misinformation. Here's actually their election misinformation policies. So they say right here, certain types of misleading or deceptive content with serious risk of egregious harm are not allowed on YouTube. Okay, what is considered serious risk of egregious harm? That would be my first question. What do you consider that?
And this is a big problem that people have run into. When you do get these flags or these warnings, they never go into detail as to what exactly was said or what you did that caused this, that whether it's a strike or whatever, what caused that penalty. They never do that. That's a big problem. So it's usually vague. It could refer to anything. And I think they need to be more specific about that. But again, I believe a lot of these responses are automated. YouTube is huge, and they're not doing what Rockfin does, where Rockfin, if I have a problem with Rockfin, there's actual people that I talk to. Actual people. When I set up my show on Rockfin, there were actually people that I met with that walked me through the process. Because Rockfin's crypto, it's not like YouTube. It's different. It's a different process. So the fact that there's just no one there for you, it's frustrating, because if you send in a ticket, and that's really what it is, again, you're not getting a real person. Like, there's this automatic response. It's usually generic, doesn't make a lot of sense. And so you still don't really know exactly what it was that was said or done most of the time. Now, for some people that have these really large channels, like, for example, some people can talk to a real person. I think Jimmy mentioned this one time that he can talk. There's someone he can actually speak to. But for most of us, we don't have that. And it's really frustrating. So I'm gonna go back into the video for just a little bit more.
Believing that something is real or not, is that egregious harm? This includes certain types of misinformation that can cause real world harm, like certain types of technically manipulated content and content interfering with democratic processes. Okay, so technically, what did they say here? It was technically manipulated content. Okay, so that is stuff that is like altered in some way. So somebody is made to look like they've said something or do something that they didn't actually do. That would be technically right. That would be a violation. I could understand that. That would certainly be misinformation if you're making somebody appear like they've said or done something that they didn't actually say or do. And then they go on to say here, oh, sorry, not that one. No, not that one. Oh, here we are. That you will find, and content interfering with democratic processes. Okay, so what is content interfering with democratic processes? I'm not even sure what this is. So this is where things get really tricky, because what interferes with democratic process. So I would say what interferes with democratic processes is if you made a statement, for example, and you came out and you were, me or a news broadcast, and you say, guess what, everybody? Oh my gosh, breaking news. The election has been moved, right? It's no longer going to be on November 4th. They're changing the date. It is now going to be held on November 16th. Show up to the polls. Okay, that obviously would be interfering with democratic processes. You're telling people don't show up to the polls on election day. Instead, go on this other day that's not election day. So basically, you did not get an opportunity to vote because you were given election misinformation that would then lead you to not vote on the day that you should be voting on. That makes sense, right? Or if you say the election location has moved and this is really where you need to head. Or, oh, guess what? You're going to get a mail-in ballot and you're not, let's say. So don't worry about needing to go and take the time off and go and find your local polling spot. So those are, I can understand all of that being election misinformation that interferes in the democratic processes. Or to say a certain candidate dropped out and so therefore you don't need to vote for that candidate anymore. I can understand that. Now, you could even say what would be interfering in election in the democratic process would be lying about your opponent. But that happens all the time, right? They're always lying about each other. They're always smearing each other. Yet that's not considered interfering with the democratic process, even though I would make an argument that that is much more interfering than many of the other things you could potentially, like running. You know, they were saying, oh, that there was all this Russian election misinformation or interference that happened on Facebook. They were buying ads and they were spreading misinformation. But what kind of misinformation were they spreading that interfered in the democratic election process? Like I mentioned, did they say the date moved, the poll location moved, this candidate dropped out?
And that's the problem. That's the problem. Like, it wasn't like the host of Rising, it wasn't like they said those things. It was a video that there was a speech from Trump, obviously saying those things. And this is the problem that I have with this as well. Number one, I don't like censorship. I think it's BS. People should be able to say what they want. I don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree with what they say either. But I don't think it's right to shut people down. And the problem that I have with this is that it's okay for major news outlets to do that, though. CNN can lie 24 hours a day. MSNBC can lie to you. Fox News can lie to you. And by the way, they're also all on YouTube. And those same segments that you see on cable TV from them, a lot of times are also on YouTube. And I can't tell you how many times I've caught, especially CNN, I've caught them in lies. But their videos are not removed. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I do want to get to the other stories as well. But the point to be made here is that it's more so about the narrative than the information. If you are not towing that establishment narrative, they will try to suppress your content. This is why I noticed I got a lot of new people the past couple of days. Some of you have probably never heard of me because they decided about 2 years ago that they were going to suppress independent media. So that's why you have these other platforms that have emerged like Rockfin, Rumble, and it's been really difficult. So, right. So after you watch my video, the recommended videos for you should be other independent media. That's not what's happening a lot of times now. Now it's a CNN video, a MSNBC video, or a Fox News video. That doesn't make any sense. So it didn't used to be that way. It used to be when I watched a video from left independent media, I would, it recommends another video from left independent media. That's how I found a lot of the channels I found. I'm embarrassed to say this, but at one point I used to watch David Pakman, and he is in my state. I'm sorry. But when I would watch him, this was a couple years ago, I was recommended other people that were also doing independent media. That led me to other people. Like I found Nico House and Convo Couch was recommended. So then I found them. And then, Slow News Day is recommended. And that's how it used to work. It does not work like that anymore. And it makes it harder, especially for those of us that are newer in this. It makes it harder for people to find us. I used to be able to enter Bernie Sanders' name on YouTube, and all this independent media would come up. Try it now and see what happens. They redirect you to cable news. And it's usually the negative content. Now, why is this problematic? Because there are things that are said on independent media that you are not going to hear on mainstream news, and you need to hear this information. because if it wasn't for independent media, I wouldn't have known about AOC like when she was running. Jimmy Dore was the first one that brought her on. I wouldn't have known about Cori Bush, all of them that ran. Now we can talk about how they are today, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it just goes to show you how mainstream media had blocked them out. And once I had that information, I passed that information on to other people, my friends, my parents. They didn't know about it either. So it's a problem. And I want to let you know it's not just the hills rising. I did find out also yesterday. Oh, yesterday was rough. Also, yesterday, a couple people I know that work at RT gone. Like Caleb Maupin put on Twitter that he was cleaning out his desk at RT in New York. They're gone. They've taken them down. So, granted, that's due to the sanctions, but it's just it's very scary and upsetting. If you go onto Twitter now, a lot of the people that had shows on RT, Twitter has put this label underneath their name that says Russian affiliated content. As if it's like a warning. Like, really? It's terrible. It's terrible. Yeah, Sherry, RT America has folded. It's really sad. It's really, there's great shows on there, you know. Chris Hedges is on there. Lee Camp was another one that announced the other day that RT, you know, his show was done. And it's not just them, also Spotify. So I did hear from Tara Reid yesterday that Spotify removed her show. And I heard from Lee Camp that they removed his show. So it's really scary. You know, we saw what was happening with Joe Rogan and Spotify, and whether you like Joe Rogan or not, I told you I don't think people should be removed. I don't think people should be deplatformed. I think it's just a scary thing. If you don't like what they have to say, then just don't listen to it and don't watch it. But very strange, very strange. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they were talking about war. And their narrative is not the narrative about war that's coming from mainstream media. That's the problem. Delthea Simmons said, this thing with Rising is a warning to everyone else on YouTube. The chilling effect of censorship affects the multitudes, not just the voice that was formerly censored. 100%. And guys, I have to say this again. If you're following me here, make sure you follow me on Rockfin. That's why I have duplicate content on multiple places. And shout out to Cool Blue for this super chat. Big tech and censorship needs to become broken up. Yes, I agree with that 100%. It's a problem. It's a problem. Kenyon Perry said, what other independent media channels should I watch? Well, I'm going to be biased here, but definitely check out Revolutionary Blackout Network, RBN. Check us out on YouTube. Sorry, I got to be biased. No, there's other people doing great work. Unapologetic on YouTube is awesome and definitely underrated, I would say. He knows his stuff, especially when it comes to foreign policy. Follow people over at MCSC Network. Follow the smaller channels. And like, I'm not trying to say this to be cynical or whatever, but everybody knows about the larger channels. You already know who those people are, so I don't need to mention them. But I think you need to start following the smaller content creators because a lot of us are newer. We're doing something a little bit different. We live stream a lot, if you haven't noticed. But definitely check out the smaller peeps. Definitely. Indie Left News Network. Check them out. They're like RBN. They have individual hosts that all have their own solo channels, but they also have the Indie News Network channel. Can't talk tonight. So yeah, definitely check all that out.